The Porsche 911 is the benchmark all other sports cars are measured by. But what if you don't want a Porsche 911? Well, as the owner of a 911, I can tell you're just wrong. That's it. End of video. I should probably stop with all this clickbait. But if you insist on not owning a 911, then these are the sports cars from each major performance car manufacturer that are viable alternatives. What if you want Porsche 911 performance, but in a Porsche that isn't a 911? When compared to the base 911 Carrera, the Porsche 718 Cayman GTS 4.0 has a starting price of $19,000 less. For that, you get a 0 to 60 mile per hour time that is the same as the 911. But Porsche also offers the Boxster Spyder and Cayman GT4, both of which also start at a lower price than the base 911, and they feel a bit more special. So if you're looking for a late Christmas gift for me, I'll take a Cayman GT4. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance that will make you want to eat pasta? Well, Maserati is Italian, so surely they have something. The Maserati Gran Turismo Trofeo has a starting price of about $5,000 more than a new 911 Turbo. For that, you get a car that goes 0 to 60 miles per hour just over a half second slower than the 911 Turbo. But Maserati also makes the MC20, which is a stunning looking machine with F1 technology. The result is a car with a price tag of about $15,000 less than the Porsche 911 Turbo S. But the Turbo S does go from 0 to 60 a tenth of a second faster. So if you would rather have a Maserati instead of a 911, make sure to swallow your pride and save tens of thousands by getting a used one, because they depreciate like crazy. You can thank me later. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance, but in a Ford package? I'm not sure anyone thinks that way, but if you do, the latest alternative is the Ford Mustang GT-D, which has a price that starts about $70,000 more than a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. Yes, you heard me right. A Mustang costs $70,000 more than a 911. The full specs are not yet released, but the estimated specs put performance similar to that of the 911 GT3 RS. So if you want a bargain Mustang GT-D, buy a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. Although I guess that really wouldn't be an alternative to a 911. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance fitting for a British spy? Well, I guess 007 has used a Lotus Amira submarine, but Aston Martin is the correct answer. The Aston Martin V8 Vantage has a starting price that is about $12,000 more than the Porsche 911 Carrera S. For that, the Vantage hits 0 to 60 a tenth of a second slower than the 911. But Aston Martin also makes the DBS 770 Ultimate, which is about $200,000 more than a Porsche 911 GT3. For that extra money, the Aston Martin goes 0 to 60 in 0.2 of a second slower than the GT3. But it does have a top speed that is 14 miles per hour faster than the 911. So if you have enough cash, you have to decide if the Aston Martin is worth that $200,000 more. And if that's you, I'm always looking for new friends. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance, but with Toyota dependability? To get Toyota dependability, you should probably just buy a Toyota. But a Camry is boring and nothing like a 911. The Toyota GR Supra 3.0 premium model starts at about $55,000 less than a base 911 Carrera. The two offer nearly the same 0 to 60 times, with the 911 beating the Supra by a tenth of a second. But Toyota also owns Lexus, and they make the RCF Track Edition with a 0 to 60 mile per hour time the same as the base 911 Carrera, and a starting price of about $13,000 less, although it does have a slower top speed that is about 14 miles per hour slower. So if it's worth about $1,000 per additional mile per hour in top speed, then the 911 beats the Lexus. Of course, that $13,000 could buy an early Porsche Boxster to go with your new Lexus. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance that makes you feel like Lewis Hamilton? The Mercedes-AMG GT 63 Coupe, or is that Coupe, has nearly identical specifications to the Porsche 911 Carrera GTS. And that similar performance only has a starting price of about $30,000 more than the 911. But Mercedes also makes the Mercedes-AMG SL63 SE Performance. It has a price tag as long as its name at over $200,000. The starting price is about the same as the 911 Turbo Cabriolet. For that, you get a car that is only a tenth of a second slower from 0 to 60. So it's pretty much exactly the same as a 911 for those that want a 911 with an engine in front. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in a car that just shouts, I'm better than you? The Ferrari 296 GTB goes 0 to 60 3/10 of a second slower than a Porsche 911 Turbo S. For a mere $100,000 more than the 911, you can have the GTB that does have the same top speed of 205 miles per hour. But Ferrari also makes the Roma Spider, which is only 0.2 of a second slower than a Porsche 911 GT3. The Roma does have a starting price of just over $95,000 more, and it does have a top speed of a whole additional mile per hour. So if an extra mile per hour is worth $95,000 to you, then we certainly are in different tax brackets. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in an American package? The Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 offers the same 0 to 60 time as the standard Porsche 911 Carrera S. The Camaro's bargain performance has a starting price of about $60,000 less than the 911. But Chevy also makes the Corvette Z06, and it can go 0 to 60 in the same amount of time as the Porsche 911 Turbo S. The Z06 starts at $100,000 less than the 911. The 911 does offer a top speed that is 10 miles per hour faster than the Z06. So if you aren't willing to pay $10,000 for each additional mile per hour of top speed, then the Corvette is quite the performance bargain. That is, if you're lucky enough to find one for sale at MSRP. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance with your tea and crumpets? The McLaren Artura goes 0 to 60 in 0.4 of a second slower than a Porsche 911 Turbo S. The McLaren has a starting price of about $7,000 more than the 911, and when the price starts north of $200,000, that isn't much of a difference. For that extra cash, you can pick up your tea hitting the same top speed as the 911. But McLaren also makes the 750S, which can go from 0 to 60 in 0.2 of a second slower than a 911 Turbo S. It does have a top speed of an additional mile per hour and the starting price of about $75,000 more than the 911. So if $75,000 for an additional mile per hour top speed is worth it to you, I'd love to see what other cars you have in your collection. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance worthy of a giant fire-breathing lizard? The Nissan Z Nismo can go from 0 to 60 0.1 of a second slower than a Porsche 911 Carrera. That makes the Z Nismo a bargain when you consider it has a starting price of about $50,000 less than a 911. But Nissan also makes the Nissan GTR Nismo, and Godzilla can go 0 to 60 0.1 of a second faster than the Porsche 911 Turbo S. The GTR Nismo does have a top speed that is 7 miles per hour slower than a 911, but then it does start at about $10,000 less as well. So you can take that $10,000 that you saved and let a tuner make your GTR literally breathe atomic fire, just like Godzilla. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance but are a Bavarian? The BMW M4 can go from 0 to 60 in 0.2 of a second slower than the Porsche 911 GTS. Of course, the BMW starts at $70,000 less, but then in base form, the M4 does have a top speed that is 38 miles per hour slower than the 911. But BMW also makes the M8, which can launch from 0 to 60 in the exact same time as the Porsche 911 GT3 RS. The M8 does have a top speed that is 28 miles per hour slower, but the BMW starts at $100,000 less than the 911. So if you want a bargain 911 GT3 RS, a BMW M8 will get you there, at least once you remove the electronic limiter. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in a package that makes you feel like the Wolf of Wall Street? That is, without the law needing to get involved. The Lamborghini Huracan STO can launch from 0 to 60 in the exact same time as a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. The Lamborghini has a top speed that is 8 miles an hour higher than the 911. Those 8 miles are probably the reason for the roughly $90,000 higher starting price. But Lamborghini also makes the Revuelto, which manages to go from 0 to 60 0.1 of a second quicker than the 911 Turbo S. The top speed is 12 miles per hour faster than the 911, which is why the Revuelto starts at about $370,000 more than the 911. So if you have, I want the world to know I have more money than brains kind of money, then the Lamborghini Revuelto is for you. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in a package that shouts America? So is it really Mopar or no car? The Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in the same time as a Porsche 911 Carrera S. That same 0 to 60 time has a starting price of $60,000 less than the 911. And at $60,000 more, the 911 is actually 12 miles per hour slower in top speed. But Dodge also makes the Challenger Demon 170, which can rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour a full full second quicker than a 911 Turbo S. And it has a top speed that is 2 miles per hour slower. And that's with a starting price that is about $130,000 less. So if you want a muscle car that can outrun a 911 in a straight line, Dodge Challenger Demon 170 might be right for you. But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in a featherweight package? I mean, who doesn't want a sports car that could float away if you aren't careful? The Lotus Amira V6 offers the same 0 to 60 mile per hour time as the Porsche 911 Carrera T. The Amira has a starting price that is about $20,000 less than the 911. But for that extra $20,000, the 911 can go a full mile per hour faster. But Lotus also makes the Avea, which can go from 0 to 60 a tenth of a second slower than the Porsche 911 Turbo. The Avea does have a starting price of over $2 million more. For that, it does have a top speed of 19 miles per hour more than the 911. So if an additional 19 miles per hour of top speed is worth $2 million to you, will you adopt me? But what if you want Porsche 911 performance in a package that says zoom zoom? The base Mazda MX-5 Miata can go from 0 to 60 1.5 seconds slower than a Porsche 911 Carrera Cabriolet. The Miata can hit a top speed that is 43 miles per hour slower than the 911, but it has a starting price of about $100,000 less. But Mazda also makes the MX-5 Miata RF, which can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds slower than a 911 Carrera. Flat out, the Miata RF has a top speed that is 42 miles per hour slower than the 911. Of course, the MX-5 Miata RF has a starting price of about $80,000 less. I guess the answer is always Miata. But what alternative to a Porsche 911 would I buy? The Ferrari 296 GTB is, well, a Ferrari, but no matter how much money I have, not sure I can bring myself to pay $100,000 more than a Porsche 911 Turbo S. But the Corvette 06 sounds like a Ferrari and costs about $100,000 less than a 911 Turbo S. So if I wasn't going to buy a Porsche 911, I'd buy a Corvette 06 and wait for people to admire my Lamborghini.